medical physics and beyond. And to all the participants, a warm welcome on behalf of St. Aloysius College, its physics department, and all of us who are responsible for this particular seminar. Dr. Raghavendra, thank you for being with us, and we are really interested in listening to you.
Thank you, Professor Lawrence, sir. Professor Lawrence Pinto is the head of the Department of Physics Department at St. Aloysius College. Now I request Dr. Ramakant Puranikar, Assistant Professor at Government Women College, Udupi, to introduce the speaker. Ramakant is also one of the classmates of Dr. Raghavendra. Dr. Ramakant, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Raghavendra Halla. Dr. Raghavendra Halla completed his BSc degree from SDM College, Ujire. Then he completed his MSc Physics from Mangalore University in the year 1998. Then he completed postgraduate diploma in radiation physics from BARC Mumbai in year 2000. Then he completed his PhD on the topic moving targets and small field dosimetry using novel film method at Institute of Technology and Sciences, Karan University. He has published 15 research papers in the international journals. With this introduction, I welcome Dr. Raghavendra Halla to this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Ramakant. Once again, I welcome all the faculty members, research scholars, our students, Dean Physical Sciences, Dr. Prakash Kamath, and all interested participants to this webinar. I hand over the webinar next to Dr. Raghavendra Halla.
Okay. Good afternoon, friends. My name is Dr. Raghavendra Halla. I'm working as a medical physicist in Ruby Hall Clinic, Pune. So my interest in this particular topic is to give you some basic information about medical physics and what are the scopes and what work we do in the hospital, so that at least some of you may find it very interesting and come into this particular field. So the medical physics, a new terminology for an applied physics of the physics branch. We entered into the field of medicine soon after the discovery of X-rays and radioactive materials. And we came into the field in the form of therapy and diagnosis. The people who are responsible for we being in the medical physics is the great man, the Röntgen and Becquerel, Curie and Hounsfield. These are the four scientists who made the path very clear for us in the medicine field. So in the medical physics, we have two main branches. One is the diagnosis and one is the therapy. So these are the two branches of medical physics in the medicine field. In the diagnosis, all of you may be knowing about the terminologies like the computed tomography, CT, or magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, or PET-CT. And in the therapies, we have radiation oncology and again a nuclear medicine branch. I'll be touching upon all these small fields to the basic knowledge so that you get some basic information about all these fields. So coming to the basic information or the interaction, so how we use radiation in the field of medicine is generally based on these three interactions. That's the photoelectric effect, Compton scattering, and pair production. So these are the three main interactions of photons with the matter which we use and derive the information in the field of medicine. In the diagnostic imaging, this is mainly the diagnostic field, where we take a radiography. As we know, here the Compton effect and the photoelectric effect is the main interaction what happens. When an X-ray, as is shown here, passes through the general tissue or a material, it will have some common absorption. So this absorption is based on the Z of the material. That means the bone is having more absorption and the tissue is having less absorption. So we get this information. So we keep a photographic film. Initially, we started keeping a photographic film. Now, of course, we replaced the photographic film with a digital imaging machine, say silicon amorphous digital panel, which is kept just below the patient back. and the X-ray is being emitted. X-ray is being emitted from this particular X-ray head, and this pass through the patient body, and we get the image. And if there is any wrong information or if anything is missing in the patient, so that is easily can be made out from this X-ray image. So this is a fixed machine, what you're seeing in the left side of your screen, and the right side of the X-ray screen is a mobile machine, because sometimes the patients are not mobile. If the patient is immobilized in the ward, then we can make these X-rays to their ward and take an X-ray of that particular patient and come back, so that patients, the care is taken care. If you look at this particular image, the right side one, the Röntgen, the great scientist, and the left side one is the first X-ray image of, can you guess who is this? Whose image is this? This is the image of Röntgen's wife's hand. You can even see the engagement ring here. He was very clever to take the X-ray image of his wife instead of his hand, because he knew that what is hazardous, what is not hazardous. So we moved into the functional studies of the X-rays, where we inject a high density material on the patient's vessel, like the arteries or carotid. And whenever that particular high density material passes through, we actually take a complete cine image of the patient and through the X-rays, and you can see where exactly there is a blocking. If there is a blocking beyond that, there is no dye passing. That means there is no high density material passing. So this gives us where is the block, and which helped all the surgeons to release the block, and a lot of patients got benefit and still getting benefit from this particular procedures. This is usually used in angiography procedures or the cath lab the machines. We do it in the heart problems. The patients, if the patients are having heart problems, we use the same type of technique, or in some cases in the neurology department also for the brain function in disformity. The next technology, which is introduced in 1972 by another scientist who got a Nobel Prize from England, Godfrey Hounsfield. What he did is, instead of taking one simple image of the patient, so if the X-ray machine is turned around the patient, you know, that's what we call as a tomography concept, the 2D to 3D concept, what we get even by using simple digital camera. The similar tomography concept he used. So in this particular situation, the X-ray machine, the X-ray head is turned around, like as you see in that, and constantly irradiating the patient and acquiring the images. There will be a detector panel just opposite to the X-rays. So you get the attenuation factors of each and every voxel in the patient body. And if you can make these attenuation factors into a CT density, or if you into a grayscale based on what is the attenuation and what is the grayscale, the linear interpretation of that, or back projectioning from the attenuation factors to the grayscale, you get a CT scan images like you've seen. In the right side one, this is a CT scan image of a brain, and you can see exactly information. If there is something wrong in the brain, if there is a tumor or some damage in the brain, we can easily visualize that. So this is how, here basically the photoelectric effect again happens when the X-ray is passing. The energy of the X-rays, what we use is about 150 kilovolts. That means kVp. The maximum peak potential of the X-ray is about 150. So that we get enough of photoelectric interactions in that place. So now moved one step ahead, another science is the nuclear magnetic resonance principles, which all of you are very much familiar with that. In this case, we started taking much more clear images than the CT scan, because in terms of the brain or some soft tissues, the CT scan image fails to give us the subject contrast. So we moved ahead from CT to MRI scanner. In MRI scanner, we use the simple magnetization concept of the protons, whichever is there in our body. So we all know that our human body is made up of water. About 60 to 80% of the water is inside the body, and the content of water is inside the body. Some people may be having more, some people may be having less, dependent on the fat in the body. So the protons in the body or in the water molecule, actually, in randomly aligned protons will be like this. The left corner of your image, you can see, it will be like this. So when you subject these protons into a strong magnetic field, all these tiny protons act as a magnetized tiny stuffs, and they align to these north and south poles of the magnetization. This is the basic concept of magnetic resonance. So when you further apply an RF pulse to that particular, when it is in the magnetic resonance of that particular tiny magnet, the flip induction happens. The induction of this magnetization from the Z-axis to the Y-axis happens. At that moment, you stop giving the pulse. So the excited from Z to Y-axis has to come back to the Z-axis by emitting a signal. That's what we call a pulp induction or flip induction decay. So this is decaying from Y-axis to Z-axis by giving some sort of energy to the lattice in the form of RF again. If you're able to collect that particular RF pulse, that pulse intensity, the pulse intensity is proportional to the number of protons from which it is coming. So you can exactly say what is the intensity of the proton at the different parts of the tissues. So this gave us an excellent image quality. Like if you see here MR brain, the CT versus MRI, in the previous one, the computer tomography images were so bad compared to the MR images. So this is further used. So this is another case of pelvis where you can see a bladder of the patient is like this, and you can see a small tumor inside the bladder, which is impossible to find it in the CT scan. Similarly, the spine of the patient, if you see here, it's very clear, and you can see is there any deformity in the spine. And if the patient is having some compression, like as is shown here, we can say where exactly the compression, and we can actually do a lot of medication for this patient in the form of surgery to release this particular compression. So this gave a functional benefit also. The patients are having seizure, or patients are having some deformity in the brain without having any the tumor or something like that. Also, we can actually exactly see where is the problem happening to the patients. So this is a great invention happening in the field of diagnostic fields. Now, another simple information what you guys need to know is the use of ultrasound. We know that ultrasound and the concept of Doppler effect, and this particular one is being used to study the blood flow in the patient body also. For example, what happens, the reflected ultrasound signal comes from this particular place to this particular place is different to the detector. So based on this reflector, the Doppler effect also happens at a different place at different frequencies. So spectral Doppler scan of the common carotid arteries will tell us where exactly is the block. This helped a lot of heart patients to know where exactly is the block, and actually block can be removed. And another common use of ultrasound is the Doppler effect again. You would have seen this particular image in many of the textbooks. You will find the use of ultrasounds. We actually do the pregnancy test, the pregnancy related scans to know the health of the baby inside the womb. The ultrasound is very well used. In principle, every woman in the fertilizing age undergo an ultrasound image in their life career. So this is the benefit of the medicine, the physics getting into the medicine. So these are the diagnostics, some of the important diagnostic. Of course, diagnostic has got a huge branch. It is a very big branch undergoing complete transformations for every 10 years. Now, another big branch of the diagnostic as well as therapy is the nuclear medicine. Here, there is a branch of medical imaging that uses small amounts of radioactive material. So that's why we say the Becquerel gave us, or Marie Curie gave us this particular technique. So we use the radioactive material to diagnose and treat a variety of diseases, like including many types of cancers, heart diseases, gastrointestinal, endocrine, neurological disorders, and other abnormalities within the body. We can make sure that the diagnosis is very accurate with the help of nuclear medicine. So coming to the one simple physics principle, what we use in the nuclear medicine is the positron emission tomography physics, PET physics. Here, as we know, a stable nuclide and a neutrino combining together, or a positron and a negatron or an electron combining together, makes a process of annihilation or a triplet production. So this annihilation process gives us two photons of 511 keV, exactly 180 degree opposite to each other. So if this particular annihilation process takes place inside the patient body, the photon which is coming in this direction of the detector and this direction of the detector, if you can measure with the help of a coincidence technique using a multi-channel analyzer, you can quantify from where it is coming, and also qualitatively you can say how is it coming. So this is the exact principle what we use in the PET physics. So as you see here in this particular graphics, two photons are exactly going opposite, and these particular photons are being captured by the detectors in the machine, and this particular detector will tell us from where it has come, and it also will tell us what is the intensity of that photon. So this gives us a fantastic advantage. So this is actually how we use this particular PET imaging is, as you know, if there is an uncontrolled growth in the particular human body, we call it as a cancer. This uncontrolled growth versus controlled growth. In a controlled growth mechanism, one tissue becomes 2 or 2 becomes 4 as per the programmed way. The program is written in our body or in the cell DNA. If 2 becomes, instead of becoming 4, if it becomes 400, that means this is unprogrammed cell growth. That means the cell is growing uncontrollably without the control of the cell itself. So when a cell uncontrollably growing to the bigger sizes, it needs more and more oxygen. It needs more and more glucose. So it sucks the glucose. If you give the glucose to the patient or a person's body, if anywhere uncontrolled growth is happening, that particular location is sucking the glucose, whatever is injected to the patient. So this is the simple mechanism of our human body. Now, for this particular glucose, if you tag that glucose with the radioisotope, so wherever the glucose goes, the radioisotope also is going. So the radioisotope, what we allow here to happen is FDG. That means the glucose tagged with fluorine-18. Fluorine-18 is a radioisotope, again, manufactured in cyclotron with a half-life of about 120 minutes. That means 2 hours of half-life. So it's a very short half-life, so that it is pretty safe for injecting the particular patient. We inject about 10 millicurie of radioisotope per patient, and we ask the patient to take complete rest for about 45 minutes post-injection. So after the 45 minutes, we ask the patient to undergo a scan of the PET scan. So then the patients, wherever there is a lack of glucose, this particular glucose attaches. Whenever that is attaching with that, and the fluorine-18, the F18 is coming out of that, which is a fluorine-18 is a positron emitter. So wherever the electron combination is there in the surroundings, it annihilates and ejects 2 particular photons in the opposite directions. In this particular example, you can see the more colored here, red colored here, that means a shortage of glucose was here, and the glucose pickup was very high here. Glucose pickup was very high and it's very low. And in other areas, the glucose, wherever you see as the blue color, the glucose pickup was very low. So this, we call it as a standard uptake value. If the standard uptake value is higher, that means that particular tissue where the standard uptake value is higher is malignant. That means the cancerous tissue. If the standard uptake value is very low, as the blue color what you're seeing, it is non-malignant area. So this gives us exactly information about the functionality of the tumor tissue inside the body. Usually this test is done once the cancer is proven to the patient. We want to know where exactly is the hypodense cancer area and where it is hyperdense cancer area. For this particular information, we see PET images. So this is one of the latest PET machine. As I said, this uses multi-channel analyzer and coincidence measurement technique, which you guys have been doing it for years now in the practical laboratories. And we also measure the speed of light and the difference of time of flight. As I said here, the 2 photons, when it is ejecting, the speed of light, we all know it remains constant, but since it is ejected from a different place, a photon which is going in this direction and a photon going in this direction will have a small time differences because of the location of that. So due to this, the difference in the timings of the photons received by the detector, we can exactly qualitatively say from where exactly it came or originated from the patient body. So that is what we see, speed of light or the flight and the time difference of the photons, and coincidence measurement of those 2 photons will give us the location of the photon from where it came from the patient body. So before this introduction of this particular PET machine, we also had something called gamma camera. It always works on almost similar concept, but here we don't exactly get 2 photons. Instead of it is coming out with 1 single photon. So we use the same concept. We inject the patient with some radioactive material like technetium-99M. M stands for metastasis, this one, the higher in energy state level radioisotope. With a half-life of about 6 hours, we inject technetium to the patient, and technetium, it goes, if you tag technetium-99M with some chemicals like MDP, So wherever there is a bone metastasis, this MDP will go to that particular place, hence the technetium-99M also. So we get the technetium M99M photon measurements using, again, photoelectric, this one, photomultiplier tube, and we quantify where exactly more qualitatively the grayscale is there. That means the photon is ejected in this particular place more versus less here. That means the patient is already having a bone metastasis, that means secondary metastasis from the primary cancer. So this is how actually we can exactly tell where exactly. If you see the right side images, this particular patient is having multiple metastases in their foot. See, wherever you find the dark, like here dots, that means that areas are having, patient may be having pain, or it may be a metastatic cancer. So these are the uses of the nuclear medicine. We also have further like iodine therapies for thyroid cancers. You may be knowing that everybody eats a lot of, the iodines so that it goes to the thyroid. If the iodine is shortage in our body, we get the goiter and all the stuff. So everybody is iodized or salts we are eating. So this is another concept in the nuclear medicine, where if the patient is having carcinoma or the cancer of thyroid, we ask the patient to have iodine 131 as a radioactive stuff so that it goes and kills all the cancerous tissue. So coming to this radiotherapy branch where exactly I am currently working, we also call it as a radiation oncology. We have two main branches in this particular field: teletherapy and brachytherapy. As the name suggests, tele is far distance and brachy is a short distance. That means the radiation in this particular technique is given from far distance to the patient body, whereas in brachytherapy, the radiation is given inside the tumor by applying a different technique. So radiation oncology is a branch of oncology in which there is a therapy using ionizing radiation, generally as part of cancer treatment, to control or kill malignant cells. This is the definition of radiation oncology. So who are all there in the radiation oncology? We have doctors, a clinical radiation oncologist, and a technologist who are going to apply whatever the radiation oncology principle to the patients directly. That means they will be in contact with the patients other than doctors. A nursing and supporting care will always be there throughout the procedure. And there is a lateral entry physicist who also is a part of radiation oncology. That means we actually don't see the patients directly, but we are involved in every patient who is undergoing the treatment in radiation oncology. We supervise the technologists and we guide doctors to give a better radiation to the patient. So how it is being done? The end result of interaction of radiation, again in the medium here. We mainly believe here in this particular thing is on Compton effect, because the energy what we use for the treatment here is not in terms of kilovolts. We use the energy of about megavolts, like 4 megavolts, 6 megavolts, or up to 15 megavolts. We have been using the megavolts MV of photons. So at 10 or above, we definitely have more and more the Compton effect and very less of photoelectric effect. So this is the advantage what we are looking, because photoelectric effect, as you know, is dependent on Z. So if it is dependent on Z and the interaction happens to the patient, that means before touching the tumor, the photons can interact more with bone and deposit all of its dose to the bone than the tumor. So that is the situation which we don't want. So we want more dose deposition in the tissue or in the tumor than the bone. So we actually look for Compton effect, which is independent of Z. So these are some of the machines which are being used. To your guess, the cost of these machines are very, very, very high. For example, this is one particular machine called as TrueBeam, which is costing you about 20 crores Indian rupees. And this is called as a robotic cybernet machine, which is costing you about 35 crores. Whereas the same here, this particular is a proton equipment, proton radiotherapy, which is costing about 1,000 crores. So this is the price range of that. Many vendors are there. Unfortunately, none of these machines are made in India. They're all imported from outside only. So linear accelerator. So this is a very simple concept, what we have adopted in our medicine, but it definitely needs the presence of physicists when you operate this particular machine. So how it works is a very straightforward way. We have the patient will be lying on this particular couch, and the radiation will come and hit the patients and as we desire, and the machine turns around the patient body. This is how actually is the new linear accelerator. These are the imaging panels. We can take the image of the patient while treatment. We can even reconstruct the CT image of the patient from this particular machine itself. So that is what we call IGRT, image guided radiotherapy. That means we do the treatment of the radiation with the radiation to the patient with the help of an image which is acquired on the position of the treatment. That is important in this particular aspect. So just to brief you about the basic principle, there will be an electron gun here which produces electrons based on the thermionic emission concept. Then that electron will be injected to the waveguide where the actual acceleration of the electron happens with the help of an RF pulse. So we need to have an RF support to the particular waveguide. Again, the concept of resonance has to happen. And when that is happening, and we turn this highly charged or the accelerated electrons coming and turning down and hitting a target assembly here. And this particular target assembly, as you said, see, this is the electron gun, the actual picture of an electron gun. This is the waveguide, how it starts or stacked. And this particular electron is gun having one coil, the thermionic procedure. Thermionic emission happens when we apply a voltage current on this is using the heating procedure. And this particular electrons were accelerated through this type, a big copper tube that is called as a waveguide. So this waveguide is about 2 to 2.5 meters in length for traveling waveguide, traveling type waveguide. For standing waveguide, it is about 1 to 1.2 meters in length. So we also have RF pulse, like the magnetron or klystron, which gives RF pulse to this particular waveguide, and it is accelerated with the help of that. And the accelerated electrons will be passed through different pieces of magnetics to bend it in whichever direction we want. And then we make sure that that particular electron is hitting a target, a high Z material here. We make sure that it hits here. At that time, shining happens and a lot of X-rays will be produced in this direction. But we don't want X-rays going in all directions. We want only one directional X-rays. We put a heavy shield of lead or tungsten in this particular surrounding a conical shape here, and X-ray comes through only in this particular direction. All other X-rays are being absorbed by that particular sheet. So then it comes down and there will be a patient lying on this particular area, and the patient gets the X-rays in a different shape as we planned, and that's how the shaping agency is done. Now, this is how it is open field. Open field is up to 40 by 40 centimeter in size, but remember, tumor is not this elliptical or square. Tumor is so irregular. So this is actually almost useless. So what we do is we put a different shaper like what you're seeing here. This is called as multi-leaf collimator. They're again a high Z material or tungsten material, a leaf of 7 to 7.5 centimeter in thickness, and the width of this particular leaf is the cost-catching stuff like 2.3 millimeter to 1 centimeter. That is what is available in that. This exactly takes the shape of the tumor in the direction of the treatment. Suppose you're treating in this particular direction. When you take a CT scan of the patient, if the CT scan says the tumor in that particular direction is this, and this MLC takes that particular shape. So then it is turning to a machine is turning to a different direction. Like this is one direction, and we can give radiation into this particular patient multiple directions because we don't want to give it to one particular direction. So basic requirement for that is a CT scan or MRI and a perfect delineation of the target, saying that where exactly is the tumor and what are the normal structures which you want to spare, because at the same time of giving a high radiation to the tumor, the tissue surrounding the tumor also gets the radiation. Our idea here is to minimize that surrounding radiation so that patients will not have complications after finishing the treatment. So we started a special technique called radiosurgery, where we give, it's a surgical procedures, like if the tumor is very small, you give a very high dose of radiation. It's a surgical dose, so the tumor is ablated completely. That means tumor is completely vanishes after about 3 to 4 months after giving this particular radiation. But remember, the tumor will be very small in size, like it may be 3 mm or 2 mm. Your machine should be having capacity to give radiation to that precisely to that particular area. So for that, what we do is we fix a stereotactic frame on the patient. We screw this particular stuff on the patient, ask the patient to go for a CT scan with this particular frame fixed on the patient face, and so that we get a coordinate. These are all coordinate systems. So we get exact coordinate system of the patient. how to treat, and we reach the tumor with the help of these stereotactic coordinates precisely for less than 1 millimeter of accuracy what we get. So radiation beams, we don't give radiations in one direction, we give multiple directions. For example, this is a beam, we give one shot from here, one shot from here, one shot from here, so that the radiation is spread out, the low dose radiation is spread out equally. At the same time, very high conformal radiation given to the patient's actual area. So this is the idea behind this. So in this particular concept, we have a lot of machines now. Another machine called as the gamma knife. Again, you can see the terminology knife. So we use photons. That's why the name gamma or gamma source. We use cobalt-60 source here with a half-life of 5.266 years with 1.133 and 1.33 and 1.17 MeV energy. So that is a cobalt-60 what we use. We use 210 sources kept on this particular machine. So these 210 sources kept here, and the patient will be tied on this particular couch, and this couch slides in, and this collimator docks in to the patient's skull and gives a focal radiation with an accuracy of 0.2 millimeter. Just remember what I'm saying, 0.2 millimeter. So to that extent, this machine can give radiation so accurately. But biggest challenge is all those accuracies are fantastic as long as the tumor is stable. Now the situation, as you see here in this particular example, the tumor is moving. This is a tumor in case of CL lung, where patient is breathing continuously. We cannot arrest the patient breathing. When the patient breathes in and out, or inhalation and exhalation, the lung volume changes. When the lung volume changes, the tumor also moves in or out. So how do you give radiation to these kind of moving targets? This is the biggest challenge. To understand this concept simply, what we do here is, if you understand the complexity of a respiratory motion, if you quantify a respiratory motion of a patient to a sine wave like what I have shown on my graph, and if you say that amplitude is, this is the amplitude of that, and the frequency of the breathing, is quantified, then you have a trajectory, inhalation and exhalation. This is the basic stuff which you need to know to understand how we do a treatment of cancer for a respiratory patient, respiratory motion tumors. So how we usually done in the era of cobalt-60 machines, like in 1970s, what we use before getting the linear accelerator, we had something called cobalt-60 based linear accelerator, the cobalt-60 based teletherapy machines. In these machines, if I quantify this as the breathing pattern, if the tumor is here in this particular green color, the tumor is moving when the patient is breathing, but we give enough margin at the machine side. We increase the field size or the radiation field size here so that at any cost, the tumor is not going out of the field border. That means we cover the tumor motions completely and we irradiate that much of complex tissues. So what happens when you irradiate or increase the field size? The normal structure also you are going to irradiate. When you irradiate more and more normal structures, the patient's quality of life comes down. Patient's prognosis may depend again on quality of life. So patient may not survive for a long time. So what we do here is something called as, this is another situation where the tumor you have planned initially, but the tumor is here only, the breathing is changed during the treatment and you have irradiated, the tumor is escaped from the irradiations. If you see here, the tumor is escaped from the irradiations. So this happens quite frequently because these are the cancer patients. They cannot breathe so precisely like a normal human. So they are already patients. So the patients, when they breathe badly, the missing of the tumor, chances of missing of the tumor is very, very high. So what we do for these kind of techniques or situation is, if the patient is capable of holding the breath, that is the best thing, because we know that when you hold your breath, the tumor inside the lung is immobilized. So you give the radiation at that particular time. As you see here, when the patient is just holding the breath and treatment is being given at that particular moment, and when the patient is releasing the breath again, the tumor is going out, and you know that radiation is also off. So the normal structure, the normal lung irradiation in this particular situation is less. But remember, breath hold has to be done for minimum of about 20 seconds each of 5 to 6 times, which is very difficult for a patient. So every patient cannot hold the breath and need a system to trace tumor movements and treat simultaneously. That is what we say optimally. We need to see where is the tumor at the time of patient breathing. Instead of controlling the patient movement, you don't control, you see on real time and make sure that you treat. So that is possible with the help of a new machine, a robotic-based machine called as the CyberKnife. In this particular machine, this is a robotic manipulator where a robot, KUKA robot of Japanese, where people use the same robot they use for manufacturing the car. The same robot is being used in here, M6 version. And in this particular machine, this is the tiny linear accelerator, an expand LINAC, where the frequency or the RF frequency is more than 10,000 frequencies, 10,000 kilohertz. So you use that particular small tiny LINAC of 6 megavolts of energy. So that is linked or held by this particular manipulator, which moves from one place to another place by taking the 6 joints. This is having 6 robotic joints. So this is a robotic delivery system, but why it has to move? When the patient is lying on this, we have fixed 2 X-ray machines on the ceiling of the room, and there are detectors below the floor. So it takes an X-ray every 10 or 5 seconds and see where is the patient tumor and tells the robot, go and treat. This is at this particular place. So response time of this particular robot is less than 30 milliseconds. That means for less than 30 milliseconds, the tumor movement can be tracked. That is the greatest achievement. So we have a robotic couch and we have a linear accelerator in that. We have a multi-leaf collimator, which I have already shown you in the previous slide. And this is how that machine actually delivers. So here the couch, the patient is lying on this particular couch, and we get the information about the patient's the coordinates of where is the patient lying with the help of an X-rays which are fixed to the floor. One is here and one is here, and it takes an X-ray of the patient and gives exact coordinate information in terms of robotic coordinates. So the purpose of keeping robot is less than 0.6 millimeter of accuracy in less than 30 milliseconds of time, the response time. It just takes one X-ray, it just takes 1 or 2 X-rays of the patient and tells where is this particular patient tumor at this particular moment within 30 milliseconds, and the robot goes to that place quickly and delivers the radiation. So this is how this machine, see the robot is coming close, this is coming very close to the patient and gives 1 shot of radiation to that particular area. We give very high dose of radiation to these kind of special techniques. Maybe you can say 10 times more than the normal patients, what we usually give for a general patient, because here it is, tumor is very, very small. So that gives us additional requirement because the robot is also capable of giving, so we can give additional dose to the patient tumor. So making sure that tumor is completely vanishes by the end of 3 or 5 fractions. So this is how the robot goes to different positions, just takes an X-rays and gives a radiation dose and comes back. So this is all about the CyberKnife. This particular machine is now currently treating the brain. And this is what the company quotes, or we can achieve a 0.95 millimeter of accuracy and 0.4448 and 30. That means 0.3, which is less than 1 millimeter, sub-millimeter accuracy is achievable with this particular robotic platform. So this machine is further extended for moving tumors. If you see here, this particular one, if you carefully observe it here, so we have put one special jacket to the patient, and this particular jacket is having 3 LEDs, infrared LEDs here. This emits infrared lights. So this actually we kept it on the patient chest to quantify the patient breathing. So when you quantify the patient breathing by actually taking the modeling of the patient's breathing modeling, so there are infrared receivers here, which keeps on receiving the information about the patient's breathing data. In addition to the patient's general setup, how is the lung doing is being taken with the help of this infrared, and we create a patient model of breathing model of patient, and the robot starts breathing with the patient, and even if the tumor is moving, robot knows that where exactly is the location of the tumor for less than 30 milliseconds, and it actually gives the radiation dose to a moving target. So this is one of the greatest advantages with again help of a multi-leaf collimator, as I've seen here, as you guys are seeing. With the help of this, we shape the tumors, the radiation dose to fit the tumor in that particular angle. So this is the capacity of this particular new CyberKnife machine. Coming one step ahead of that, a particle radiotherapy procedures. In this, you may be knowing about some of the concepts of a Bragg peak, how a proton energy absorption is happened inside the tissue versus a photon. Photon is almost like an exponential curve, not true exponential. So this is how a photon beam is being absorbed in the body. And what is the green color, what you're seeing is the electron beam is being absorbed in the body. That means if a patient tumor is about 20 centimeter deeper, what I get at the patient 20 centimeter deeper is just 50% of the total intensity of the photon dose emitted by the machine. Remaining 50% is absorbed by the tissue above the tumor. That is an additional dose normal structure is getting. That means above that particular 20 centimeters, suppose there is a kidney here, there is an eye here, eye is getting 80% of the dose, whereas the tumor is getting 50% of the dose. So this is how the concept of photon. So we are not very efficient in doing this. Instead of that, if you look at the protons, you know the real reason why the Bragg peak is like this. The energy absorption happens only at this particular place and not here or not here. The red colored one, what you're seeing is a proton, the depth dose or the dose absorption curve. Here in this particular situation, suppose the tumor is in this particular place, the tumor gets full 100%, whereas the tissue above and tissue below is getting less than 20%. So that is the advantage of particle radiotherapy. So, but this is a very small peak Gaussian curve, which is not possible for any tumor to fit in this particular size. So what we do is we spread out the Bragg peak with the help of some special technique, and we spread out. So how much, suppose the tumor is 5 centimeter, we spread out the Bragg peak to a 5 centimeter thickness in this particular direction, so that below that again radiation is less, above that again radiation is less. The tumor is getting 100%, whereas normal structures are always getting less than 100%. So what is the advantage of that? If you see here, photon versus proton, the right side, this one is the photon image, and this is a proton image. It's a child, it's craniospinal irradiation, CNS issues for the patient, a small baby actually. Here if you see, the patient's heart is getting some dose, whereas in proton, patient heart is not getting any dose. So that is the advantage of getting proton versus photon. Same thing here. If you see here, see the heart is completely spared with proton, whereas heart is getting some dose. So the radiation is good for killing the tumors, as at the same time, radiation can also cause cancer. Remember that this is a double-edged sword. The radiation cures cancer, at the same time, radiation creates cancer. So that is what actually is that. So how do you use it for how much situation, what are the situation is a skilled work which requires a medical physicist in the field. Now, coming to the another field, what are the radioisotopes we use in addition to the linear accelerator is cobalt-60 we use in a short distance brachytherapy procedure, cesium-137 again brachytherapy, iridium-192, iodine-125 or iodine-131 in nuclear medicine procedures. These are the radioisotopes commonly used. So one more branch is the last branch which I'm going to brief you on is a brachytherapy. This is a high dose rate remote afterloading system. This is one particular machine which is having 10 curie of iridium-192 or 2 curie of cobalt-60 source inside this particular machine. So what we do with this is we place some sort of catheters. For example, this particular picture where you're seeing the left corner is a CA prostate, cancer of the prostate. We keep a template here and inject or insert a needle inside the prostate. One side of the needle is projected outside. This is the case of CA tongue, carcinoma of tongue. We inserted a needle from here and pulled it outside. So one side is locked completely. The patient is having tumor in this exact area and it is coming out like this through the patient's chin. This is another case where the CA breast, where a needle is inserted and exited from this side. So wherever you are seeing exited side, so this is another procedure where intraoperatively we done. We have opened the patient completely, dissecting the patient's stomach. We kept a flap here with the radiation sources and we give a radiation source to the patient on this spot and remove this flap and close down. So this is called an intraoperative brachytherapy. This is another catheter where patient wants to preserve the beautiness of the patients. Then we have something called mammocide, a balloon. We inject we put a small balloon inside and fill that balloon with the help of water and pass the radiation to that balloon. So the surrounding tissue, the blue colored what you are seeing, is getting the radiation by keeping the other tissues intact. So these are the special procedures with the help of a surgeon. We do it. The complete activity here is monitored by a medical physicist, because we are the people who are calibrating what is the source dimension, what is the source activity. Whatever you are seeing, the open-ended one is being connected to this particular machine, and we operate the machine from outside. There's a technologist group, we operates the machine from outside, then the source from here goes towards that and treats and comes back as we program. So these are the requirements of the special gadgets what we have been using in the field of radiation. Now, when we are using radiation, as you know, radiation is something which cannot be seen, which cannot be felt or smelled, but you know that it is very hazardous. So we need to give radiation with a very high accuracy, the spatial accuracy, that means the location of the radiation given, and quantification, how much I have given. Both are very important. So this is the actual job or responsibility of a medical physicist in the hospital. So what do we have for that? We have a computer programming for this, a treatment planning system where we get a CT scan of the patient or MR of the patient or PET images of the patient, and with the help of a radiologist and radiation oncologist, earmark completely where that patient is having tumor, and we do or generate a treatment plan, a simulated plan, how the patient has to be treated in the machine. If you treat in this particular one mode, what happens? Whether the patient's normal structures like parotid, brainstem or brain, is it safe? Whether the patient is going to come back with some reactions later on. So all those things, this is called as a simulation or a treatment planning or patient dosimetry, which is done with the help of a high computing technology like a GPU-based, processor-based machines, where we do a 3D modeling of the patients, and complete structure delineation is done, normal structure versus tumor, and a treatment plan is generated. So this treatment planning system is a very high piece of a technology and a physics. Here what we do is the dose calculation algorithm. That means how accurately the planning system, when I say planning system gives me a dose of 2 gray or 5 gray, how is that 5 gray, whether it is accurately calculated? Because in this particular direction, bone is there, tissue is there, in this particular direction, air is there. Whether the planning system quantified all those things and quantified the dose to me, that is the biggest challenge. So for that, the new thing coming up in the field is a Monte Carlo based dose calculation algorithm, a system. Here, the radiation transport problem, basically a primary photon, primary electron, and the delta rays, to what extent one photon enters and makes an interaction here, and again parallel interactions here, 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 till complete death of that particular energy happens. But that happens at the time of infinity. So what we do is we put a cutoff there. Okay, the delta is less than this much keV, stop it. We know that it is not going to escape through the patient body. So by putting this kind of reactions, what we actually ask the system here is, we know what is a photoelectric effect, Compton effect, pair, and Rayleigh scattering, how it is happening, what are the energy ranges. This model is being fed into the system, and it knows what are the primary electrons, what are the secondary electrons coming, what are the radiative interactions. Every interaction is being taken into consideration when I quantify a total absorption of radiation at one particular point. So that is called as a transport of a particle. A particle from starting of the particles to the end or depth of the particles. I create a lot of histories here, condenser histories, and small if an interaction is grouped, and because otherwise if I don't create condenser histories in Monte Carlo iterations, the time is infinite. It goes very long times. To avoid that, the new technologies came here. So here, in this situation especially, the green one, what you are seeing is the tumor, and tumor is having a tissue inside, a high Z material here, dense material, and surrounded by air, and just next to the tumor there is a bone. That means very high Z material. So different densities surrounding the tumor, calculating the dose accurately to the tumor is a big challenge. That's why we adopted Monte Carlo simulation concepts. In this system, we need to completely quantify and tell the system what is my machine is. this modeling has to be done. Then the system creates different Gaussian curves at source and at collimator and at patient, so it knows how is the scattering happening, and it knows how the attenuation and interaction happens inside the body, and it calculates and accounts exactly what actually we need. So that is about the systems what we have been using now. Now current research, that means what is happening in the field of medical physics and radiation oncology. Here is, we are bringing now, the next level is artificial intelligence and adaptive RT. That means patient has taken treatment today. The radiation treatment is not given in 1 or 2 days. Depending on the size of the tumor, the radiation is given over a period of about 30 to 35 days, 5 days a week. By Saturday and Sunday, we don't give any radiation to the patients, because Saturday we do the quality assurance of the machine and Sunday is holiday. So 5 days we give a treatment for the patients, and 30 to 35 days depending on the case. So when the patient starts taking day 1 treatment of a small pill, it's like a small dose, because we don't want to overdose the patient. A small dose is given on the day 1. By the end of day 4 or day 5, patient may find it little differently, because the tumor might have a little bit responded. So if the tumor is responded, the tumor size, shape, everything changes. When the tumor size and shape changes on day 4 or day 5, if I treat that day 4, day 5 patient on day 1's treatment plan generated, which is not accurate at all. So we need to again create, that means every day we need to create additional 1 more treatment plan for the patient and treat. Suppose you have 100 patients treating on 1 day, 100 patients, 100 plan in a day, you cannot generate, because 1 plan generation takes about 1 to 1.5 days for us. So you cannot generate it. So to make this happen, now a new technology came into picture, is artificial intelligence, neural technology use and artificial intelligence. Here we create a database ourselves, and we teach the system, we teach this computer saying that this patient has probability of moving like this. So you make sure that all these plans are created for me. So what system does? The system creates all of the permutation combination plan and keeps it in the database. You take a treatment plan of that treatment image on that particular day 4 or day 5 and see how is the tumor, and see which plan is coinciding with the plan generated by the machine, and that plan is being used. So that is what is called as adaptive RT. So this is the current research happening in the field of medical physics, which is coming up now. We have already launched this one particular machine called as Ethos. Maybe in another 1 to 1.5 years, artificial intelligence is the future in our radiation oncology. So in addition to this particular technology, what we've been using, see, technology is good as long as we know how to use it, or at the same time, people or the manpower using that should be equally qualified or knowing to use that particular machine. So one of the biggest challenge what we face in the radiation oncology or medical physics is quantification of the actual dose delivered to the patient. At the same time, radiation safety. We don't want to give a wrong patient wrong dose. We don't want to irradiate any normal person to the radiation dose. At the same time, we ourselves don't want to be irradiated to the radiation, because we have been working with the field of 15, 20 megavolts of photons. They're very highly penetrating photons, which can pass through maybe 2 to 3 meters of concrete. So we don't want to get ourselves exposed to that. So to do all those things, we have lots of gadgets available with us. The quantification, the electrometers are there, and some of the servometers are there, some of the phantoms where we use to do the testing in the chambers and everything. So what do we do in the clinical system is, we give a lot of clinical services, including treatment plannings to the patients and quality assurance to the treatment machine. That means every machine has to undergo a quality assurance before we start the treatment to the patient services. So another work what we do is the consultations. Like as a consultant, we can actually help a lot of people. Like a person who is working in diagnostic field comes back to me, suddenly says, "Sir, I'm pregnant. Can I work or not?" So this type of questions keep coming to us. So we need to evaluate them precisely and guide them so that their life and their child life and everybody's life is at safe. So this is another work which we have been doing. And this particular field, the field of medical physics, is full of research and development. There are more than about 150 plus journals, publishing journals, which are all very highly indexed, and they're into the field of medical physics. And we involve ourselves into the direct patient treatments, and we get the satisfaction that yes, I have been contributing to some extent to the ailment of a patient's recovery. So that is what actually is the goal here. And we involve in a lot of teachings and effective radiological imaging. A physicist is required. If you want a fantastic image to be taken, we can only guide a radiologist saying that you do this, you get a fantastic image, assuming or assuring radiation safety. So radiation safety is another branch where medical physics works, and with the coordination of Government of India. So every center who is running radiation system needs to have somebody called Radiation Safety Officer, who is directly reporting to Department of Atomic Energy, DAE, under that Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, AERB. So this is how actually we have been mapped. In the clinical services, we do the dosimetry, the quantification of the dose to the machine and as well as the patients, and treatment planning using treatment planning systems, and image acquisition, and any sort of IT related issue. Since we are the most qualified people in the field of medical physics, we actually the first call for all the technical glitches of the department. We discuss with the radiation oncologist, we discuss with the radiation safety, we do a lot of QA based on patients, to the patients before delivering the radiations. And consultations, another consultation aspect is, see, we design radiation equipment rooms. Like for example, a linear accelerator has to be placed. It cannot be placed on a simple 9-inch brick. It has to be designed with the help of a concrete, a 2.5 or 2.6 meters of concrete, so that everybody is safe who are working around the bunker. So this particular design is based on the energy of the machine and the locality and the place and the machine, the availability of the space and all the technical logistical issues. Based on that, we design how much should be the thickness here and how much should be the thickness of the wall in each direction. And we design it and submit these particular documents to the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. And if they approve it, then only the construction can work. So for getting an approval, RSOs, a radiation safety officer, or a medical physics consultant signature is required worldwide. So we do the research and development in the institute where we work. More than that, supply centers like the manufacturers of these linear accelerators actually have a lot of research projects, and they have a lot of appointment for medical physics. And again, in solid state labs, nuclear medicine laboratories, and university hospitals, the research happens. So what are the scope for this practice? Manufacturing design, acceptance testing, commissioning of machine, preliminary beam data collection, that means modeling of the linear accelerator once it is installed into the system. Parallelly, the major responsibility of a medical physics goes to the interaction of radiation with the tissues. The radiobiology is the biggest branch again. We can design a study to say how much dose is required for which type of cancer, what are the radioprotectors. That means if you give some sort of medicine to the patients, the damage to the normal structures will be less. So these kind of actions can be taken care. In addition to this, again, the radiation safety, the safety of the patients and the safety of the staff who is involved in the procedures. If you see this particular, this is a cath lab procedure, patient is being, this is the X-ray tube, patient is being exposed below the couch, the patient lying table, and we collect the information and quantify the blockage in the artery or wherever the patient blockage is there. In the process, what happens if the doctors involved in the procedure is not focused much, or sometimes they're not trained well, they forget to switch off the machines, they forget to remove their foot from the switch, or they may be unaware of the fact that radiation is still going on. And this kind of, or the machine may be malfunction, instead of 100 kV, it may be booming with 200 kV. So these kind of things happens, the resulting in a small back patch on the patient's back. If you see here, this radiation injury, which cannot be cured. No flap will work. Nobody can give any plastic surgery on this. This is a permanent damage what patient gets. This is a primary, the chronic, the acute reaction, whereas the chronic effect of this is patient may come back after 5 or 6 years with the development of a cancer somewhere in the body. So these are the risks actually with the radiation. As I said, radiation is a double-edged sword. It kills cancer. At the same time, it makes damages more than harm. If we feel that the damages are less than the risk and damage is what we consider either for the patient. If the risk of the patient is less compared to the damage what patient is undergoing, then only radiation is prescribed. The risk is more than the damage, then I think damage, the radiation cannot be taken for the patient. This is one particular child. If you see, while undergoing a procedure, patient's head, the patient was undergoing a cardiac procedure, the arm of the patient was touching the X-ray head, resulting in peeling of the complete skin, exposing the bone. So there is no other cure for this, only amputation. That means removal of the hand of that patient. So you just imagine you have cured her heart problem, but you have removed one hand. So this is what happens if we don't have a clear picture what actually we are doing. So excess radiation can catch you unaware. We will not be knowing what happens till we get a result what happened. So to control this, we have Atomic Energy Regulatory Board constituted in 15th of November 1983 by President of India. So the mission of the AERB is to ensure the use of ionizing radiation and nuclear energy. India does not cause undue risk to the health of people and environment. So under the guidance of AERB, every institution is compelled to register and practice as per the practice guidelines dedicated by the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. So there is another big association of medical physicists, AAPM, what we call American Association of Physics in Medicine. We have the similar one in India, AMPI, Association of Medical Physicists of India. So as per them, the guidelines or the definition for physicists is scientists who clinically practice whose clinical practice is dedicated to ensuring accuracy, preciousness, safety, and quality in the use of radiation in medical procedures such as medical imaging and radiation therapy. So who can be the physicist then? A person having physics as a special subject in graduation and post-graduations. So all of you are post-graduation, so definitely you all can become a medical physicist. So how to become a medical physicist? If some of you want to become a medical physicist, there are two wings. One is become after BSc Physics, do MSc in medical physics from a recognized university. Now it is 2 years course plus 1 year mandatory internship. And if you have already done MSc Physics, I appreciate this because I have done my MSc Physics and then I went to this. This is a 1 year again post MSc Diploma in Radiological Physics. That means PG Diploma in Radiological Physics. It is currently conducted by HBNY University in BIRC. And this also requires 1 year of course plus 1 year of mandatory internship. After completing this, you have to be certified by Atomic Energy Regulatory Board with the help of a competitive exam called Radiation Safety Officer post. So then only you can work as a radiation safety officer. In the absence of RSO exam, you can still become a medical physicist, but you will not be able to work as a radiation safety officer. That is the only difference. Otherwise, you can work as a medical physicist. So currently, RPNDD is conducting by, this particular course is conducted by RPNDD in BIRC campus. And after BSc or MSc is based on your financial conditions, because these courses run by now some of the private agencies are not cheap. They charge you about 2 lakhs per year. So based on your affordability, you can choose whether you want to become an MSc in medical physics or post-MSc in radiological physics by AERB. If you get into the BIRC one, they give you a stipend of 25,000 rupees per month and in-house accommodation is available. And I recommend that as one of the best courses which you can actually take. The reason is it is taught by a lot of eminent faculties from Bhabha Atomic Research Center directly. So that is the advantage of that. So they get a better job posting compared to the other available one. So there are MSc Physics, not less than 60% marks in aggregate through full-time program is required, and common entrance test will be there, and qualified candidates will be interviewed by Anushakti Nagar, Mumbai, at that particular place only. And there are some private universities. There are many of the universities. Some of the best universities which I can recommend is for post-MSc, best is Mumbai. Then they have in Kerala, they have in Vellore also. And MSc, they have in Maharashtra, Chennai, and many more to add on this. So after conclusion of the course, you can get into the healthcare to become a medical physicist and RSO, or you can work also in industry, healthcare product manufacturing company. There are a lot of opportunities abroad for this one because a lot of the manufacturing industries are not in India. They're out of the country. So you get a chance to go out. And in the government sector also, you can get into the scientific officer C post directly after finishing this with AERB or RPAD or BIS scientific officer. These are the posts what I recommend. The best part is there are plenty of opportunity for doing the PhD after the course, and while you are working in the hospital, you are earning also, and you can also continue your PhD. So that is a benefit of this particular aspects. I thank you guys, and thank especially my old buddy, Dr. Chandrasekhar Shetty, who gave me this opportunity. So you can actually ask me if you have some questions.
Dr. Raghavendra, it is
Yes,
one of the fantastic presentations
Thank
what
you.
we had. The amount of messages I'm getting personally tells the quality of the lecture. A lot of questions are posed by the participants.
No problem.
Take one or two questions. One student asked, Mr.
Yeah.
Sagar, he says, does scanning deforms DNA?
I didn't understand.
The scan, the procedure, what you conduct,
Okay,
that
scan.
deforms DNA.
Okay. No, it is not DNA based. DNA based studies are totally different. It's a genomics or genetics. It's usually done with the genetics department, and nanoscience is coming into picture again with this one. That's totally a different branch, which I didn't want to touch because that is too big. So what we do, the scans are based on the functionality of one specific organ, like the tumor versus the non-tumorous tissues. So they're not genetic based one. So, but when a patient undergoing a treatment in radiation oncology, it's not only the radiation treatment is being done. In addition to that, patient would have undergone surgery, patient would have undergone medical oncology, medicine-based one. But these modalities, especially the medicine or the medical oncology, is based on genetic information. So genetic basic screening has to be done for many of or majority of the patients before we design what should be the medical oncology regimen for treating.
Okay. One more question.
Yeah.
Whether treatment planning is machinized now? Treatment planning is machinized now.
Treatment plan machinizing is happening in the name of artificial intelligence. That is what I touched. But initial stages, still we need our requirements, physics requirements is required. Even if it is atomized or machinized, which is done with the help of a computer. We all know what are the limitations of computer as of now. Without a human intervention, it is not practically possible to 100% machinize the process. It is done manually as of now.
That was a question asked by Dr. Rajesh Kumar, senior for our friend. Okay.
So
now, whether glucose level is different at different parts of the body, glucose level.
Glucose level is different in different parts of the body based on the mitotic stage of the tissues. If any tissue is undergoing more mitotic rate, that means the reproduction rate of a tissue, if it is more, that means it needs more glucose. For example, for example, now I have spoken for about an hour. If you take my vocal cord scan, and vocal cord will have very high intake of glucose at this time. A person who is doing a lot of exercises for one specific muscle, that particular muscle will require more oxygen and more glucose. So it is spread out like that.
Okay, Dr. Jayaprakash Gowda got the answer, I suppose. One more general question by Dr. Vincent Costa. Why India we are not able to produce such high-end instruments, although a lot of research is there?
So yeah, this is the basic question which we also keep asking and encourage. The thing is, like, to come out with one masterpiece of one machine like what we have been getting from the foreign, it actually takes a huge investment to build that level factory. So when they make that kind of factories here, and the product cost will be very high. When a competitor who is selling worldwide, who is selling more than 1,000 Linux in India, he comes with a very less price, with whom we Make in India guys need to compete for almost 2 to 3 times of his price. So definitely we don't get any chance, and he will be taking the chance and going. This is what actually is happening. Now, one company in India is manufacturing Linac, but they're not of very good quality. But they are actually manufacturing in India. Most of the government centers now are actually acquiring that particular linear accelerator made in India.
Okay, I hope some participants also may have some questions.
Sir, I have one question here.
Yeah.
As you said, in brachytherapy, radiation-92 source is used. Whether the level of dose for all the patients is same or different?
That depends on tumor. For example, CA breast will get a different dose and CA tongue will get a different dose. So the dosage is not fixed here in this case. The dosage is different for different patients based on a lot of issues, like what type of cancer, what is the grade of the cancer, how big is the cancer. Everything is dependent to decide the dosage here.
Okay, sir. The one more question, as you said in the brachytherapy and as well as the radiotherapy, that using cobalt-60 source or the linear accelerator, which is more dangerous or which is more advantageous now, whether the brachytherapy or the radiotherapy?
No, brachytherapy goes as a parallel one. Brachytherapy is not replaced by Linac or anything. Even if patient undergoes a linear accelerator treatment for a case of CS cervix, cervical cancer or endometrium cancer, brachytherapy is still used after the Linac treatment because brachy is a very localized treatment. So the requirements of brachytherapy is totally different compared to the linear accelerator. Linear accelerator, a wide area is being used prophylactically. That means expecting future presentation of the tumor, we treat some of the nodes where the lymphatic drainage, where the blood is getting purified, that particular nodes related to the tumor where the surgery is done is being also treated by the Linac. So Linac is always treating about 20 centimeter or 25 centimeter sizes also, whereas brachytherapy not more than 3 to 4 centimeter in size of the tumor. So they are two different things.
Any other participants?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Somebody says radiation therapy is expensive in our country. What is your opinion?
Radiation treatment, what we charge for 30 fractions in India is being charged per day in US. That is, you understand what I'm saying? Suppose we charge per patient about 2 lakhs for entire course of radiation. In US or in Europe, per day they charge about 2 lakhs. But this price of the radiation equipment, we pay almost the same money as the US companies are also paying. So we actually spend more on machineries and we earn very less. A machine, see, when a hospital wants to invest something, they need to make money. You know, by the end of 6 or 7 years, they will make their revenue done. That means if they have invested 25 crores to run their 25 crore machine, they need to have manpower like us. Medical physicists, for example, 1 manpower requirements. The starting salary of a medical physicist in Delhi itself is about 85,000 per month. So an experience like 20 years or 25 years experience in medical physicists will demand about 5 lakhs per month as his salary. So to get that, if you want the quality to be done, you need to pay high and get those manpowers and run the system. When you do this much of quality work, you need to really charge for the patient. So we charge comparatively worldwide. India is the country which is charging the least. We charge about, as I said, not more than 2 lakhs for some of the procedures. Some charges are very high. For example, proton. Now recently we got one proton center in Apollo, Chennai. And the investment of that is 200 million. That means about 800 crores of money is being put on one project. It is complete asset of that Apollo group as being sucked by the proton machine. So they can't be doing charity. So they definitely need to charge. So they charge about 30 to 35 lakhs. Still, the proton treatment in India, if whatever charge they're doing is 1/3 of the price worldwide. So worldwide, the charges are too high.
Any other questions, participants, please? Please unmute yourself and speak if you have any question. Rakesh Bandari, what is your question? What are the factors which can affect the results of cancer therapy?
Yeah, the factors, they're actually very highly clinical stuff, but still I will try. The factors, what actually affect the results of any therapy is at what stage they appear and what stage they will have been diagnosed. So we actually in the village, we try to get all the medications done ourselves. Then we go to a local clinicians and he will do whatever is possible for him. By this whole procedure, we may be losing about 1 to 1.5 years. So 1 to 1.5 years, most of the cancers will double or triple in size. Then we go to a surgeon. Then when the surgeon does his intervention, it is actually too late for many of the cases. So for those patients, the prognostic factor is very, very poor. That means they will not be able to do many things on that. But we know that surgeons will open up and see, only scoop out whatever is best possible. They will remain and stitch back and say to the patient that I have done whatever is possible. That's it. So they cannot do more than this. So in these kind of cases, the results will definitely depend on how they appear and when they appear.
Okay, thank you for a very informative session. Now I request my colleague Dr. Neelakantan VK to propose vote of thanks. At the same time, I would say your classmates were present for the session, your teachers were also present.
Fantastic. I'm so happy.
Okay. Now Dr. Neelakantan, please.
Hello, thank you, sir. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Raghavendra Holla, Chief Medical Physicist, Ruby Hall Clinic, Pune, for having reserved this time for us and also having presented a very nice session or a very informative session on medical physics. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I also thank Professor Lawrence Pinto, the head of the Department of Physics, and Dr. Chandrasekhar Shetty, the head of the Postgraduate Department of Physics. Thank you. And I thank all the participants who have attended in large numbers. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
At the end, Dr. Raghavendra, there are now also 122 participants are present for your meeting. That shows how
Fantastic.
impact of the lecture. Really excellent.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm very proud of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
COVID impact is over.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
ಇಲ್ಲ ನಿನ್ನೆ 3 ಗಂಟೆ ಹೋಗ್ತದೆ.